I met Melissa 8 years ago at a charity fund run, of all places. I wasn't even planning on going. My coworker had signed us up without asking, and I showed up mostly for the free t-shirt and the promise of burgers afterward. Melissa was there with her best friend, laughing at how neither of them had trained and just wanted to walk the whole thing. We ended up in the same slow group, and over the course of 5 very sweaty kilometers, we kept pace and kept talking. She had this effortless way of making strangers feel comfortable. She teased me about my shoes, asked if I always turned this red when I exercised, and told me I ran like someone being chased by a bee. I couldn't stop laughing. After the race, we grabbed a drink at the park's food trucks, and I remember thinking, I want to keep talking to her. Just more. I got her number. We went on our first date 3 days later. It was nothing fancy, just coffee, then a walk around the lake, but it felt like we'd known each other for years. Our conversations never had those awkward pauses. Everything just clicked. From there, things moved steadily forward. A few months later, we were spending nearly every night at one of our places. We fit easily into each other's lives. Melissa was driven, creative, full of energy. She worked in digital marketing, managing campaigns for small businesses. I liked how passionate she got about her projects, how she lit up when she talked about her work. I was more steady, more routine-based. I worked in IT support at a mid-sized firm, but she never made me feel like my job was less important or less interesting. If anything, she grounded me. And I think I helped balance her out, too. After about a year, we moved in together. We found a 2-bedroom rental just outside the city, close enough for her commute, quiet enough for me to breathe. It was a little run down, but we made it ours. We painted the kitchen together, badly, bought secondhand furniture, and argued over throw pillows. There was something beautiful about those early days. We didn't have much, but it didn't feel like we needed more. We got engaged the next summer. I proposed at the same lake where we'd had our first date. It was early evening, soft breeze, just us on a quiet bench. Nothing flashy, just a moment that felt right. She said yes before I could finish the sentence. We planned a small wedding with close friends and family. It was personal, heartfelt, and honestly one of the happiest days of my life. I looked at her during our vows and thought, this is the beginning of everything. And it was. Married life started quietly for us. There was no dramatic shift, no post-wedding letdown. If anything, it felt like we'd simply slipped into a deeper version of the rhythm we'd already found. We were still ourselves, just with rings on our fingers and a shared last name on the mailbox. And honestly, I loved that. I didn't want fireworks every day. I wanted what we had: steady mornings, simple dinners, quiet confidence in each other. We bought our first home 6 months after the wedding. It was a modest 3-bedroom on a quiet street. Nothing fancy, but it had a decent-sized backyard, and Melissa immediately started dreaming up plans for a garden. We painted the walls ourselves over a long weekend, and every time I passed that slightly uneven trim in the hallway, I remember us laughing over how bad we were at cutting in with a brush. She wanted the kitchen to feel bright and warm, so we went with a soft yellow. I thought it looked like a lemon exploded, but I didn't say anything. She was so proud of it. Weekends became our time. Saturday mornings were for sleeping in, slow breakfasts, sometimes a walk through the farmer's market. Sunday afternoons meant errands and prepping meals for the week. We had our shows, our favorite takeout spots, our routines. There was comfort in knowing what to expect from each other. We made space for the small things: handwritten notes in lunchboxes, playlists for long drives, late-night conversations about nothing in particular. Melissa's business was taking off. She'd started consulting for a few bigger clients, and I could tell it lit her up. She loved the independence, the creativity. I supported her however I could, setting up her workspace in the guest room, helping with the occasional spreadsheet, picking up more chores when her deadlines piled up. I was proud of her, genuinely. My work stayed steady. I wasn't climbing any ladders, but I liked the people, the stability. And truthfully, I liked coming home to her more than anything. Home wasn't just a place, it was us, in that space we'd made together. We started talking about kids around our 2nd anniversary. Not urgently, just floating the idea, imagining what it would be like. Melissa wanted to wait until her business was more stable. I was in no rush either. We figured we had time. Meanwhile, we poured ourselves into friends, hobbies, short trips. Sometimes we'd take off for the weekend without a real plan. Just drive and find a motel when we were tired. Those trips felt like snapshots, small, Happy capsules of time I can still feel in my bones. Holidays were spent with family. Thanksgiving at her parents' place, Christmas with mine. My mom adored her, and my brother Eric, well, he was always a bit reserved around her. They never really clicked. I figured they just had different personalities. Melissa could be blunt, and Eric was more guarded. I didn't think much of it. Looking back now, those years felt like a long, peaceful inhale. The kind of life you build without realizing how much you're trusting in its permanence. I was content, grateful. I thought we both were. But peace, I've learned, can be deceiving. Still, back then, I had no reason to question anything. By the time we hit our 3rd anniversary, life had found its rhythm. It wasn't exciting in the way it used to be when we first met, but it was reliable, comforting, even. We'd settled into something that felt permanent, like bricks laid one after the other in a path we were walking together, always forward. Melissa's business had grown into something real. She hired a part-time assistant, expanded her client list, and even got featured in a small business magazine. I still remember how proud she looked when she showed me the article, her name in print, her photo beside a quote about taking risks. I framed the page and hung it in her home office. She rolled her eyes, called it cheesy, but she smiled every time she walked past it. We started saving for a bigger house, not because we needed more space yet, but because we were thinking ahead. Kids were still in the someday category, but we talked about them more often. What we'd name them. What kind of parents we'd be. She said she hoped they got my patience. I said I hoped they got her energy. Our evenings were routine but meaningful. She cooked more often than I did. Melissa liked experimenting with recipes, though half the time we ended up ordering takeout anyway. We'd eat at the kitchen table, swap stories about our day, and sometimes linger there long after the plates were empty. She'd sit on the counter, barefoot, glass of wine in hand, talking about her latest marketing pitch or venting about a client who wanted too much for too little. I'd tell her about IT fires at work, the annoying printer that never worked, or the guy in accounting who always microwaved fish. She always laughed. We had our rough days, sure. Times we were too tired to talk. Minor arguments over laundry or schedules or how she never seemed to put her keys in the same place twice. But nothing ever felt big enough to shake us. We'd argue, cool off, reconnect. That was our pattern. We didn't stay mad long. My family remained a regular part of our life. Sunday dinners at my parents' house, birthdays, holiday cookouts. Melissa was close with my mom. They'd text often, trade recipes, even go shopping together occasionally. My brother Eric, well, his dynamic with Melissa never warmed up. He kept things polite but distant. I chalked it up to personality differences. Eric could be intense, sometimes moody. Melissa was the opposite, talkative, impulsive, unapologetically bold. They just didn't click. I never pressed it. Looking back, it's strange how easy it was to assume everything was exactly as it seemed. We had a home, plans, shared dreams. Sure, the spark wasn't as fiery as it was when we started, but I figured that was just part of the deal. Love changes. It deepens, steadies. Or at least, that's what I believed. At the time, I didn't know I was living in a story that was already cracked beneath the surface. But right then, in that chapter, I felt lucky. Maybe that was the most dangerous part of all. It started small. It always does, doesn't it? Melissa had always been a little impulsive. She thrived on last-minute plans, bursts of energy that sent us on weekend drives or spontaneous movie nights. But this felt different. Less spontaneous, more distant. Like she was planning things without me and then making me part of the story after the fact. I remember the first time it really hit me. She came home one Friday, buzzing with energy, talking fast about a networking event she just remembered for Saturday. Just some business thing, she said, waving it off like it was no big deal. It's mostly boring, but good for visibility. I'll be back before dinner. I asked if she wanted company. Sometimes I went to those things with her just to be supportive, but she brushed it off. Nah, it's not really a +1 thing. Just a mixer for creatives. Then she changed the subject like she always did when she didn't want to dig deeper. That night, I watched her get ready with a kind of care I hadn't seen in a while. She straightened her hair twice, changed outfits 3 times, spritzed perfume I didn't even recognize. When she left, she looked like she was heading to a date, not a business mixer. I told myself not to overthink it. I told myself she was building a brand, that she had a right to feel confident, to go out. But still, I felt something. Not jealousy, not even fear. Just distance. Like I was watching her from behind glass. Things kept stacking after that. She started being more protective of her phone. Not in an obvious way, just more careful. Less likely to leave it lying around. She changed her passcode, told me it was for client security. Seemed reasonable. I believed her. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and saw the light from the hallway spilling into the bedroom. I found her in the kitchen, phone in hand, smiling softly at something. When she noticed me, she jumped a little, then laughed it off. Couldn't sleep. Just checking emails. She slid the phone into her robe pocket like it was nothing. But I noticed her hand was shaking slightly. Again, I said nothing. What was there to say? She hadn't done anything wrong. Not technically. And I wasn't going to be the guy who made his wife feel watched or accused. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that her smile wasn't entirely mine anymore. Even the way she talked about my family changed. She used to joke around with my brother, Eric. Even if they didn't click, she made the effort. But lately, she didn't bring him up at all. When I asked if he'd RSVP'd to a family barbecue, she shrugged like she barely remembered he existed. It didn't make sense. But I let it go. Because love makes you slow to see. Because I didn't want to believe anything could be wrong. Because part of me still trusted her completely. And maybe that's what hurts the most, looking back now. There's something strange about realizing you're being left behind without anyone physically leaving. Melissa was still in the house, still making coffee in the morning, still asking about my day. But there was a change, a subtle vacuum of warmth. The way she said my name, the way her hand barely lingered on my shoulder anymore. I noticed it. I just didn't know what to do with it. I kept telling myself it was just a phase. That all couples go through lulls. That maybe her business had her mentally elsewhere. But the thought started creeping in during the quiet moments, when I'd see her step outside to take a phone call, her voice lowered, her laugh too soft and sweet. Or when she'd come back from client meetings that ran hours later than they used to, without much explanation. She wasn't pulling away completely. If anything, she tried harder to seem like nothing had changed. She kissed me goodnight, showed me pictures of necklaces she was designing, even planned a weekend trip for us to a cabin we'd visited years earlier. But those gestures felt curated, like she was giving me just enough to keep me from noticing what was being taken away. We had dinner with my family one weekend, something we hadn't done in a while. Everyone was there, my parents, some cousins, and Eric. I hadn't seen him in weeks. He was polite, as always, but quieter than usual. He barely looked at Melissa. She didn't really look at him either. It was awkward in a way I couldn't quite explain. After dinner, I found Melissa outside on the porch, sitting alone with a glass of wine. She smiled when she saw me, but there was something about the way she exhaled, as if I'd interrupted a thought she didn't want to share. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, too quickly. "Just needed a breather. Your mom's pie is trying to kill me." We both laughed, but it felt forced. I wanted to ask her if something was bothering her, if she was unhappy, if something was wrong between us, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I kissed her temple and said, "Let's go home." That night, she curled into me like everything was fine. But I didn't sleep much. My mind kept circling back to Eric, to the way he avoided eye contact all night. The distance between them didn't feel like dislike anymore. It felt like avoidance. Like there was something they were trying not to show. Or maybe I was just imagining things. I wanted to believe that. Still, a strange thought started looping in the back of my mind. What if I wasn't the only one who noticed the shift? What if someone else knew her better than I did? I didn't have any proof. No texts, no photos, no confessions. Just a growing silence where trust used to live. And the worst part? I still wanted to believe I was wrong. At some point, I stopped trying to convince myself everything was fine. I didn't admit anything out loud, not to friends, not even to myself in the mirror. But the effort I'd been putting into justifying Melissa's behavior started to crumble. I wasn't angry, not yet. Just tired. Tired of carrying the weight of a question I wasn't supposed to ask. I started noticing patterns. Not the kind that scream infidelity. There were no lipstick stains, no unfamiliar cologne, no secret hotel receipts. But it was the subtler stuff that ate at me. Her mood shifts. How she seemed a little too cheerful after being out for hours. How she barely touched me some nights, then overcompensated the next with warmth that felt practiced, like she was trying to erase something. She began dressing differently too, more effort when going out, but almost no interest in looking good when we were together. It felt like I was watching her perform for someone else and save only the leftovers for me. I tried bringing up how I felt, not directly, but gently, in the form of concern. I asked if everything was okay, if she felt stressed, if she needed a break. She always gave the same answer. just tired. And then she'd pivot, how's work? Or, did you talk to your mom this week? I let her change the subject every time because I was afraid of what might happen if I didn't. One evening, we were watching a movie on the couch, something we used to do religiously every Friday. Halfway through, I looked over and realized she wasn't even watching. She was texting, her screen turned slightly away from me. When I asked who it was, she said it was her assistant. Her tone was casual, but her fingers locked the phone a second later and slipped it under a blanket beside her. I nodded, pretended I believed her, and didn't ask again. But something about the way she looked at me afterward, half defensive, half apologetic, cut deeper than any lie could have. Eric, meanwhile, had become a ghost. We used to talk weekly, sometimes just to check in, sometimes to vent about work. But lately, I was the only one reaching out. When he did answer, his tone was clipped, distracted. I asked him if he was okay, and he said he was just keeping to himself these days. I didn't press. I should have, maybe, but I figured everyone goes through stuff, and I didn't want to be the brother who pushed too hard. Still, there was a moment I keep replaying. My parents had invited us over for dinner one night. Just the four of us, no extended family. As we left, my mom pulled me aside and said, "You're lucky to have Melissa. You know that, right?" I nodded, smiling, not thinking much of it. But then she added, almost too casually, "Some people wait their whole lives for someone like her." It should have been comforting. It wasn't. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right with me. I started feeling like a guest in my own marriage. Melissa would walk past me in the hallway without noticing I was there. She was present, physically, but emotionally, it felt like she was somewhere else entirely. I'd lie awake at night beside her and feel lonelier than I had when I was single. Still, I said nothing. I did nothing. I let the silence grow, because some part of me still clung to the version of her I married. And I wasn't ready to find out if she was gone for good. Things came to a head the week we got the invitation. It was for my dad's birthday, a family get-together my mom had been planning for months. Nothing huge, just a backyard dinner with music, catered food, and everyone expected to show up. Melissa seemed unusually excited when she found out Eric would be there. That caught my attention. She didn't say his name often anymore, and when she did, it was usually in passing, like she was trying not to acknowledge how weird things had become between them. But this time, she actually smiled when she mentioned him, then quickly changed the subject as if she'd let something slip. I told myself I was reading into it. I'd been doing that a lot lately, second-guessing everything, analyzing expressions, tones, timing. It was exhausting, but it also felt unavoidable. When your gut keeps pulling at you, you can't ignore it forever, even if you have no proof, no evidence, just a growing sense of wrongness. Leading up to the party, Melissa started acting different, nicer, but in a performative way. She started making dinner again, checking in on my day, watching shows I liked without rolling her eyes. It felt like she was trying to stitch something back together without telling me what had been torn. One night I asked, half joking, "You okay? You're being weirdly sweet." She just smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "You deserve it." And maybe I did, but not like that. Not as an apology I hadn't heard yet. Then came the dress. The day before the party, she came home with a new outfit, sleek, elegant, more revealing than her usual style. "For the party," she said, twirling in front of the mirror. "Figure I might as well look good for your family." She looked stunning, no doubt. But there was something about the way she said it, the deliberate edge to her voice, the glance she threw over her shoulder, that made me wonder who exactly she wanted to look good for. I didn't ask. I couldn't. There's a strange paralysis that comes with doubt, when the only thing standing between you and a truth that could ruin everything is one question you're too scared to ask. The night before the party, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying conversations, moments, details I'd previously brushed off. The laughs she shared too easily with Eric. The way he stopped coming around. The conversations that stopped when I entered a room. I told myself I was being paranoid. That families are complicated. That not every weird feeling means betrayal. But the truth was louder now. And whatever I was about to walk into, I knew it was going to change something. I just didn't know how much. The night of the party started out like any other family gathering. Laughter, chatter, the smell of grilled food and warm drinks filling the backyard. String lights hung between the trees, casting a soft, golden glow on everyone's faces. My mom was flitting from table to table, Eric was already nursing a drink, and Melissa, she looked radiant. Too radiant. She wore the dress she'd bought earlier that week, form-fitting, deep green, paired with heels I hadn't seen before. Her hair was curled, makeup perfect. She turned heads, sure, but what unsettled me was the way she avoided mine. She greeted my mom first, hugged Eric longer than necessary, and only glanced at me after everyone else had gotten their share of her attention. We made our rounds, talked to cousins, smiled for photos. Everything on the surface was smooth. Too smooth. Like everyone was reading from a script they'd rehearsed without me. Later that evening, I stepped inside the house to grab my phone charger. I wasn't trying to snoop, wasn't looking for anything. I just needed 10 minutes of quiet. That's when I heard them, Melissa and my mother, talking in the dining room just off the hallway. The door wasn't closed all the way. I froze the second I recognized Melissa's voice. Low, tense, like she was trying to be discreet, but couldn't quite hold it in. He's plan B, she said. I stood still, heart hammering. I wasn't even sure what I'd heard. She laughed lightly. I mean, come on, you know that. He's safe. That's what I needed back then. But Eric's the real thing. My mother didn't argue. She actually agreed. I always thought you two made more sense, she said, in that gentle, knowing voice she used when sharing secrets. But after what happened with his last relationship, he didn't need another mess. You were better off with his brother. I felt like the floor had shifted beneath me. I didn't know whether to storm in, scream, demand answers, or disappear. My hands shook. My mind raced. I had no idea how long this had been going on. A few months? Years? But the way they spoke, so casually, so comfortably, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't new. This was old. And I was the only one who hadn't known. I backed away from the door quietly, numb. I didn't confront them. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed my charger, walked outside, and told Melissa I wasn't feeling well. She gave me a look, half confusion, half irritation, but didn't question it. She turned back to the conversation she'd been having with Eric like I didn't matter. I drove home alone. The silence in the car was deafening. By the time she got back later that night, the locks had already been changed. By the time I got home from the party, I didn't need to think anymore. I didn't need to analyze, over-explain, or talk myself out of what I'd heard. It was clear, brutally, painfully clear. Melissa had betrayed me. Not just once. Not in a moment of weakness. But deeply. For a long time. And with my own brother. And my mother knew. That detail still sits like lead in my chest. I didn't rage. I didn't throw things or scream into the walls. I moved in silence, methodically. First, I took her car keys off the hook in the kitchen. Then I opened our shared account and transferred every dollar that was mine into a separate one. I didn't leave a single cent. The car was in my name. The house too. Everything she enjoyed, her lifestyle, her comforts, had come from me. I changed the lock before midnight. She didn't come home until nearly 1 a.m. I saw her through the peephole, dressed in that same deep green dress, jacket slung casually over her shoulder. She tried her key once. Then again. I watched her confusion morph into irritation. She knocked. Light at first, then harder. Babe, she called. What's going on? I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just stood there, quiet, letting her voice hit the door like a wave against stone. Finally, she called me. My phone lit up with her name, over and over. I let it ring. When she tried the knock again, more forcefully this time, I opened the window on the second floor, looked down, and said, "You don't live here anymore." She stared up, stunned. "What are you talking about?" "I heard everything," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "What do you mean?" "Heard what?" "You and my mother. Talking about how I was plan B. How Eric's the real thing. Don't bother lying, Melissa." I was standing right there. She went pale. "Wait, just let me explain." "No, I'm done listening to liars." Her voice cracked. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care." She screamed something I didn't catch. Maybe my name, maybe a curse, but I shut the window and walked away. By morning, her things were in garbage bags on the curb. Clothes, shoes, all of it. I donated what was worth keeping, tossed the rest. I blocked her number, blocked my mother's too. I called a locksmith and had the garage rekeyed. I didn't want a single trace of her in my space. Eric never reached out. Not that I expected him to. Cowards don't usually beg forgiveness. They hide. And he was good at that. The silence that followed was heavier than I expected. Not sad, just Final. Like walking out of a fire into cold air. You don't even realize you were burning until you're out. That night, I slept like I hadn't in years. The days after I shut the door on Melissa were quiet in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not just because she was gone, but because something inside me had stopped bracing for impact. I hadn't realized how much energy I'd been spending, trying to read her, trying to keep something alive that had already been hollowed out. It was like standing still after years of running and finally letting your legs buckle. I went to work. I paid bills. I watered the plants. But everything felt strangely detached, like I was moving through someone else's house. For the first week, I still reached for 2 coffee mugs in the morning out of habit. Still glanced toward the door at 6 p.m., expecting her voice. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just let the silence settle over me like dust. It was oddly comforting. This stillness, this absence. I started sleeping through the night again. Real, uninterrupted sleep, the kind that feels like shutting off completely. I didn't tell many people what had happened. A few close friends knew the basics, enough to avoid awkward questions. My dad came by once, quietly dropped off some groceries, and left without pressing me. I think he knew. Or maybe he'd known more than he let on. We didn't talk about it. We didn't need to. A few weeks later, I joined a local hiking group. Not because I loved hiking, but because I needed to be around people who didn't know my story. Strangers who didn't look at me like I was broken or betrayed. That's where I met Rachel. She was different. Not flashy, not loud. Just steady. We started walking near the back of the group on most hikes, talking about books, music, random things. She had this calmness that didn't ask for anything. No big questions, no emotional check-ins. Just presence. After the 3rd hike, she invited me for coffee. It wasn't a date, but it could have been. I wasn't ready, not fully, but I went. Over time, we started meeting outside the group. First for weekend walks, then lunch, then quiet dinners where the conversation felt effortless. I told her the truth in pieces. She didn't react with pity or anger or judgment. She just listened. Sometimes, that's all you really want. To be heard without someone trying to fix you. I started noticing the little things again. Sunlight through windows, the smell of coffee in the morning, the peace of waking up without dread. It wasn't some dramatic reinvention. I didn't buy a motorcycle or move across the country. I just started being myself again. Slowly, quietly, in a way I hadn't been allowed to for years. And one day, I realized I wasn't waiting anymore. For her to call, for Eric to explain, for anything to go back to what it was. That version of my life was gone. And I didn't want it back. I wanted something real. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I deserved it. It's been over a year now. A year since that night in my parents' backyard, since I heard my wife call me Plan B and realized my own mother didn't see anything wrong with it. A year since I locked the door, blocked the numbers, and walked away from everything I thought I was building. It's strange what you remember most after betrayal. It's not always the big, dramatic moments. Sometimes it's the quiet ones. The way Melissa looked away from me just before I realized she was gone. The way my brother stayed silent. The sound of my own breath in the hallway after I heard the truth. Those moments stick. They don't scream. They echo. But they stop defining you. I thought it would take me longer to feel normal again. I expected years of rebuilding, of being bitter or angry. But the truth is, once I cut the cord, once I decided I was done explaining myself to people who never cared to understand me, something unexpected happened. I got better. Not overnight. Not without scars. But steadily. Like scar tissue forming over something that used to be an open wound. Some days I still feel the tightness of it. The ache of being betrayed by not just a partner, but a family. But it doesn't consume me anymore. It doesn't own me. Rachel is still in my life. We're not rushing anything. We both carry our histories carefully. But she's been one of the most honest, grounded people I've ever met. She's never tried to fix me. She just meets me where I am. That kind of presence? It's rare. And it's enough. I've learned not to measure love by how loud it is. Not by how many texts or gifts or grand gestures someone gives you. Love, real love, is consistency. Kindness. The way someone listens when you speak. The way they don't flinch when you show them your worst day. And more than anything, I've learned this. You don't need to stay where you're not chosen. That version of me, the one who excused the distance, who made peace with the silence, who kept pouring into someone who was never full, that man is gone. He left the night I heard the truth. And I don't mourn him. I'm grateful to him. He did what he had to do to survive. But now I'm living. To anyone out there holding on, wondering if the feeling in your gut means something, it does. Trust it, even if you don't want the truth. Especially then. It will hurt. But on the other side of that hurt, there's freedom. I'm not healed. I'm just honest. And that's more than I've been in a long time. Thanks for listening.